Welcome to Noon Hour Slides from the Moose Jaw Museum and Art Gallery. We're located on Treaty 4 territory, the traditional lands of the Blackfoot, Cree, Ojibwe, Saulteaux, Dakota, Nakota, Lakota, and on the homeland of the Métis Nation. We pay our respects to First Nations and Métis ancestors and reaffirm our relationship with one another. We gratefully acknowledge funding from the City of Moose Jaw, SaskArts, SaskCulture, Saskatchewan Lotteries, Canada Council for the Arts, Canadian Heritage, and the Government of Canada. I'm Vincent Hotelling, the administrative assistant here, and I'm here to welcome you to today's presentation. Today we're going to learn about China. Welcome.
Welcome, everybody. China had long been a destination that I'd wanted to see just because of all the mystery around it. It's taking bad press now, but one of the politicians come and go. The people are the same. So when I had the opportunity, I jumped at it. Mao took over in 1949. They developed this flag. The big flag and the big star in the middle is to represent all of China. Each of these small stars represented 100 million people. And back in 1949, there were 400 million people. It has gained to be the most populated country in the world, almost a billion more in that short length of time. Has 1.4 billion people. Now I enjoy going and playing. I like to go down to Bobby's and play trivia. And I have found anytime they ask a question, where was this invented? If you didn't know and you guessed China, you were right probably 80% of the time. The other one is always which country produces the more of this? That one is another one. If you guess China, you're probably right more often than not. They invented tea in 2000, almost 3,000 years ago. To give you an idea, China right now is in the 5,000 year of their calendar. We're in the 2000 year. To give some perspective in that, the time they started recording on a calendar year, that was about the time that the Inuits ancestors were starting to trek down from the far north into Saskatchewan. That was how long they have been producing their calendar. It's an amazing place. Now tea in China is considered a necessity. And a lot of people think it comes from India. It's China, and we've got the expression. I wouldn't do that for all the tea in China. It's also the only country that you can find these cute little guys. You can find it in the wild. They have keep them in zoos all over, but it's the only place in the world you can find pandas. Talk about their inventions. They discovered ice cream 4,000 years ago. It was just a combination of milk, ice, and snow. A European named Marco Polo went over there and he brought them back. He introduced Italy to noodles and ice cream. Now Italy is famous for its gelato and its pasta. Believe it or not, they invented ketchup. In fact, the word ketchup comes from a Chinese word, which is a sauce they used to make to put on their stuff that was made from fermented fish. They didn't invent ping pong, but they are world champions. What else did they invent? They invented kites. They invented paper. They invented the compass. They invented gunpowder. They invented printing. They invented toilet paper. They developed paper money. So I was anxious to get a look at this type of civilization that led to so many things. Our trip started in a little place called Shanghai, hardly little. Shanghai is the most populated city in China. There are 24 million people in Shanghai. This gives you an example. There's two of them. That little building in there is now the second tallest building in the world. It was the first one before the Burj Khalifa was built in Dubai. Over here is the Pearl. That is a communication tower. There are 25 million people here, but you don't have to worry because English is taught in the schools and they're very good. They're very fluent in English. It's now considered a financial center of the world. Love baseball. Our trip started in the morning. We headed up, we got on the bus, and the first place we went was called the Temple of the Jade Buddha. First thing I noticed there was the aroma of incense, and you would hear bells ringing. Thought that the incense, the flowers, the fruits, these are all offerings to Buddha during times of prayer. Now, Buddhism is a way of life. It is not necessarily, it's not a religion. You can have Muslim Buddhists, you can have Christian Buddhists. It's basically just a way of life. When you hear the bell, that's supposed to represent Buddha's voice, and it is a call to prayer. Our guide was there and gave us a little bit of an introduction about how things, and you light the incense all around. These are some of the statues. This is all around. You'll see these little red ribbons. The red is a symbol of a life force. It's supposed to give us compassion for fellow human beings, and it tells us to mind our tongue. Don't say hurtful things. It is interesting. Even it's thought in the Christian Bible, the color red is thought to hold off bad luck. You'll see the bells there. Here is the Jade Buddha. Now, it isn't that old. It's considered that about 20,000 Buddhas visit the temple of the Jade Buddha every year. It was found by a monk who came from Burma in the 1800s. This Jade Buddha is about 3 feet long. This is the reclining Buddha, and it was 12 feet long. Now it's interesting, I look back and had the opportunity to see the reclining Buddha in Thailand, and the reclining Buddha's foot was about 12 feet long. You'll see these statues all over. I call this my ebony and ivory thing. I had never seen a black Buddha before, or a black musician that was involved with this one. And the scary part was I saw this and I thought I was looking in a mirror. Then we were off again, and the next place we had the chance to stop at was called the Garden of Happiness. Now, the Garden of Happiness, it's not hard to see why it is that way. In here, you get amazing examples of Chinese architecture, sculptures, carvings, and there's even a bazaar as you get to the end of it. You walk across this bridge. This bridge, well, it's given the name, it's called the Junquei Bridge, which means it's the 9-turn bridge, because 9 in the Chinese philosophies of things consider prosperity. And by walking across that bridge, it was thought that you would be prosperous. It would bring you good luck. You can see the koi. These are the koi fish were the tamest fish I've ever seen. And they're constantly now, they help guide you across this bridge. There's a little better picture of all of the different turns into the bridge. And as you get across the bridge, you go to the oldest tea house in Shanghai. Then we headed for the business district. This is the financial center of here. Over here, again, we get to see the Pearl, and over here happens to be the Shanghai Tower. It's interesting with the Shanghai Tower, as you can see here, the original architecture of the tower. Now these are, you can see the office buildings with sort of gives you a little example of just how massive the building is. Originally, this little hole in the top was supposed to be circular. And after they sat and looked at it, they thought it reminded them too much of the Japanese flag. Now, the Japanese have been enemies of China for years. And so they changed it into this little trapezoid. It has, and so because of that little hole, it's gained the very unromantic term, the bottle opener. Tough name for the second tallest building in the world. As you get up, this is a picture of Shanghai from the top, from where you saw that little hole. There are two things about this, and that, of course, is the Pearl. That's the communication tower, and you can see that from almost all over. But the other thing you'll notice is the smog. It is, when you have a city that is that large, smog is the problem. And I was there in the summertime. In the summertime, there's quite a bit of humidity, very little breeze, so there's nothing to move that smog away. So it is a concern when you've got 24 million people in an area like that, it's a problem. This picture I kind of liked because I thought it sort of gave me the impression of the communist effect when the People's Republic of China took place. All of these buildings are the same. They don't have an individual design. They're all same, which is sort of an example of what comes out of the communist regime that is taken over. As you stand, you go up the elevator. This is a picture again, and it would be a beautiful picture, except it's reminiscent of the constant smog factor that you find there. The Pearl in the background, Sharon is standing there taking her picture. It looks like she's got a nice smile. That's a grimace. She's not crazy about heights. And you can see she's standing on one of these clear floor bottoms, which go all the way to the bottom. But she wouldn't stand on the glass. She's standing on the partition that you find there. We had a nice dinner, and then we're gone to a real treat. That at the evening, we hopped on a boat and we took a cruise down the river. It was the Mother River of Shanghai. It's called the Hongpo River Cruise, and if you go there, I highly recommend this. You get a chance to see the two sides. The east side is called the Bund, when empires like Germany and England and France and them realized the richness that were available in China, they sent people over and they tried to get a toehold. And they built these places on the east side of the river. It was the financial center for the Europeans, and you'll see the architectural structures from all of these empires that were coming at the time. The other side is where the Chinese took over, and the West Bank is the Chinese economic center. And in this one, they have places like the Jinmao Tower, of course, the Oriental Pearls there, and the Shanghai Tower. I was amazed at some of these. This place, that's a TV screen. The whole side of the building is a television screen, and it shows different things. Most of the time it's showing advertisements, but it is incredibly impressive. Then we got a chance, after we finished our cruise, we got a chance to go to a nice little walk, and you're hit by these amazing aromas and smells because of the outdoor kiosks and food that can be bought there. Here was an example of one of them that we had. You have two in here. We see this on this side happens to be a shrimp concoction, which I might have tried. This one is larva, and I didn't have the nerve to try that. This is just chicken, and over here is eel. It's interesting to know with the eel, at the end of the 19th century, England was famous for its eel houses. you'd go in there. And that was the first real fast food things that came from England. And you'd sit at long benches, you just munch it, and you just throw the bones on the floor. I still haven't, I don't care what the stories are, I still haven't had the nerve to try it. There's an example of the larva. Larva's, I guess, is very, very high in protein. I've noticed in a lot of shows, whenever the Bushmen in Australia or Africa come across it, they save it and they eat it. The thing that's weird about it for me is that often the times they're wiggling, and that's the last thing I eat. That's chicken and the octopus. That was quite a treat in Shanghai, and that was my opening. The next one was great. We ended up taking a little flight inland. We ended up going to this place, Xi'an. Xi'an is famous for its terracotta army. Now, Xi'an was one of the 4 ancient capitals of China at the time when it was, well, it is a huge country, and it was divided, and it took some time. When we got there into Xi'an, we were treated to these. These are the terracotta warriors. There are 8,800 statues, and they represented the army of the first emperor. There are 8,000 soldiers, 500 horses, 150 cavalry horses. There's 130 of these chariots. They were made to be buried along with the emperor. They were to protect him in the afterlife. Here's a few examples of just and every one of them is different. They're all individually done, and they're all different. It's quite an imposing sight. And then I came across these bronze horses, and they were to represent the horses that the emperor had, the horses that took his chariots as he went. It was an amazing place, and it really is an amazing structure. Then off into the street, and you never know exactly what you're going to find. Here we have, those are mangoes on one side. I think those are strawberries on that side, but you found these places where there are steaming dumplings, little dumplings. Now these were dumplings that had some kind of vegetables inside them. And then we found these, they looked like little ducks, and they had little pieces of duck inside. And their soups, the aromas of their soups is just absolutely phenomenal. That turned out to be a pretty impressive day. Then it was time to fly back, and we headed to Beijing. It was interesting. All my times in high school, I had heard it was Peking. And now that I found out, Peking was a name given it by French missionaries. In the 1970s, the Chinese decided we're calling our capital by our name, and that's when it became Beijing. Of course, early in the morning, we got together and we headed to this place. It's called the People's Square. It's Tiananmen Square. About 30,000 people a day. It can handle about 30,000 people a day. Most of these people, guards are around it. I found a little guard that I thought was pretty intriguing. This one will give you an idea just how massive that square is. And it's still used it's still used for political addresses at times. It is a place where people go to celebrate China. Most of the people come there for one reason though, and they're the ones standing in this line. This is the tomb of Mao Zedong, the founder of the People's Republic of China. Millions pass through that line. The embalmed body is in a central hall in his tomb, and in that tomb it's covered by dim lights. You only get 2 minutes. That line moves very, very quickly. And you get 2 minutes to go through and watch the embalmed Mao Zedong's embalmed body. Now, this place had a lot. When the peace movement was moving in 1969, I can remember seeing pictures of flower people putting flowers into gun barrels back home with the National Guard in the United States. And so the young people all over the world said, enough of this war. We want it. And we can all remember this iconic picture. The Chinese the government had to bring in their army from the northern parts because they didn't want them to have been affected by this peace movement that was going on. And this brave young man stood there and faced these tanks as they came down. Now, he did get away, but there were a lot of students who didn't. About 200 students died during that time. This is also roughly the time that 4 students were killed in Kent State. So it was a tumultuous time, but it led to better things. That night, unfortunately, I couldn't take a picture, but we went to a live performance. It was a martial arts play where they demonstrated martial arts with a story behind it. And it was very, very impressive. I was thinking about trying to sneak a picture, but then I was thinking, whoa, this is communist China. I'm not sure. I think I better keep my nose about as clean as I can at this. The next morning, we got a chance to go to the second most visited place by tourists. This was the Imperial Palace. It was a home for emperors for 500 years. There had been 24 emperors there. The last of the great Chinese emperors was in 1912. It is built right in the center of Beijing. Now, until it was finished, normal people couldn't go there. It was just it's like a large museum, and it's one of the largest museums in the world. Right now, it's 3 times larger than the Louvre in Paris. And we can only get in to see about 60% of it. It is the largest wooden structure. So fires were a real danger in China because many things were built out of combustible materials, same as in Japan. And so in this one, they've got 94 underground hydrants, and they've got 55 plans designed that they practice. So if a fire broke out, it would be fine. The other thing that we noticed, there are no trees in the outer courtyard. It is thought that they did not want the emperor to be made to look smaller by nature, but more people figure that if there were no trees, assassins couldn't hide there. And if assassins couldn't hide, then the emperor would be safer. You'll also notice there's a dominance of red and yellow. These designs, the designs are very, very intricate. They're red and yellow. We've talked about the symbol of red earlier. Yellow because it is considered an earth pigment, and they wanted to show how the emperor and Mother Earth were connected. Many, many people visit. I couldn't help but take a picture of this little guy who was there visiting the structures. The thought was quite high here on this because the architectural design is very steep, and those tiles are extremely glazed and slippery. They did not want birds landing there and soiling the roof. So they made those designs and set them up so birds could not sit comfortably on them. And again, you'll notice all of the reds and yellows. Just a little bit of an example of the intricate design that they found up. It was very, very attractive. This was the interior. Normal people could not go in here. This is where the emperor went, and you weren't allowed to look at the emperor if you went in there. You had to keep your head down. And then you could go, and but you would face him if you were of importance. He would face you in there, and that's where he would meet with you. Those were brought in because of areas that came in, and they've taken them out. They've been by people who have come through that had been long gone. So those were just examples of the thrones that they had to sit there. It was quite a building, and it was huge. After that, we had a chance to go see the Empress's summer palace. This was built in the background. You can see that is a huge, huge lake. That's a man-built lake. It was built by the emperor for his mother on her 60th birthday. First thing, now, it is built on this lake, and there are huge hills all around. One of the first hills you see is called Longevity Hill. And on Longevity Hill, it's where they built, this one's called the Tower of Buddhist Incense. In this one, it is halfway up Longevity Hill. Now, when the Europeans took over, this one has been destroyed several times. It was built by the British and the French forces. Then it was rebuilt, and then the Boxer Rebellion in 1900s, it was destroyed again, but they keep building it back. It's in this particular part of this particular temple where the Empress would receive her guests that would come to visit her. Now, it is interesting to know the Boxer Rebellion is why we have Boxing Day. We have the holiday we have after Christmas was named after that rebellion. As you walk around, you get an example to see this. Beautiful walkways and trees, lotus flowers. Then we come to the Hall of the Dispelling Clouds. This is a long corridor all around. You walk down this corridor. In this corridor, you get intricate designs. You get painted ceilings. You see lotus flowers and willows. You see tons of shops, and there's all sort of action. This little one's picking, I don't quite know what it was, but you see all sorts of things that are happening and going on here. Little bands, and you see all these little ones with their decorations. Sharon had bought her little nieces some of these when she brought them home, just for an example to where the design she got from here. Here's a little more picture. All of those on busy days are filled with shops that you can go down. This is called Suzhou Street, and you go down there, and it was the emperor's concubines, when they had time off, would go down. Now, they didn't have any money to buy anything, but they like to go down into those shops, and they like to pretend that they were shopping. This is the theater of the Empress Dowager. Opera is huge in China, and it all started here when she had this theater built, and they brought in opera shows from all around the world, and eventually China developed their own opera, and it is quite prominent in that place. Another thing the emperor built was this marble boat. Now, needless to say, it's a marble boat, but it's not going to float. But it was built, and it's supposed to be a symbol of the strength and the indestructibility of China. Now, we had walked, this is way over on the other side of it, and I was thinking, boy, oh boy, we're going to walk all those back. We've already seen them, but we didn't. We got on a real boat, and we got a chance to just gently cruise. It was about a 20-minute cruise that we could get on one of these boats and just relax and talk about some of the amazing things that we had seen in this area. After we had finished our little tour of the lake area, we went to a pearl shop. I had never seen pearls in the wild. This was an example of what the pearls looked like inside the oysters. Now, needless to say, there was all sorts of jewelry there, but I didn't know there was any difference with pearls. And they said, oh, there isn't. They all have their own little colors, their own textures. They took these four ladies, they looked at their complexions and how they were dressed, and they gave them pearls that would best fit their complexions. So you can see her, this lady here on the end with her pale, very, very white, little darker. She has darker pearls, and I just thought a pearl was a pearl. I had no idea that they made a difference like this. They look pretty nice. They even took the eye colors in when they were considering what kind of pearls would best fit them. That afternoon, we got on a bus. Now, at first, I wasn't very happy. We were going to go tour a school. I worked in a school. I figured I'd come all the way to China to go and see another school. I wasn't very pleased. We got on this bus and we went through the countryside, and this was my first show how different. In the cities, especially in places like Beijing and in Shanghai, it's the quality of living is very high, very expensive. You just get out of the city, and all of a sudden you've got poverty galore. The sewers just were in ditches that ran down and outside, and it opened my eyes a lot. And we were driving, and we ended up stopping just outside this cornfield. Got out of the bus, and all I could hear were these drums beating. And I thought, what in the world is going on here? We got out of the bus and we followed this trail. As we got there, the village had come out, dressed in their costumes, and were welcoming us into their village and then on into the school. I was impressed, extremely impressive. The costumes were beautiful. The people were amazingly friendly. This was the band, and they just escorted us all the way into the village. And when we got there, all of these little guys were all standing there to welcome us in, dressed in their school uniforms. Well, most of them were dressed in their school uniforms. You notice the teachers all had parasols. Now, there's a reason for that. In China, white is the symbol of the high class. If you don't, it's thought that if you were tan, this means you had a lower job and you had to work outside. If you had a higher job and were higher in society structure, you stayed pale. And we're finding out more and more that the sun might not be the best thing for us, especially when considers places that worship the sun are very, very high in melanoma. After we were introduced to them, we followed them into their schools. We got a chance to see that. Now, it took me a little while to realize it was the summer holidays. This was in August, and they didn't have school in August either. So these young men, all of these little kids, came on their own. Now, EF stands for Educational First. Now, I just thought it was a name to help entice people to take student tours, but it's not. They spend a lot of money in building schools in these areas that don't have much. And so when I got in there, it was a real thing. We were actually expected to go and do a little work when we got out here. They came here and we were supposed to do a little bit of work. I went and found a shovel and I shoveled about 3 loads and figured, well, it's enough for today. And then I went back and joined everybody. Here you see it's an origami class in which they're practicing paper folding. The thing that impressed me the most was these young guys, these young students could have been any place in the world. They made me think so much of our own back home. They all seemed very, very happy. And they welcomed us to come into their place and see them. That short lesson, we got to see of origami, which is sort of like, I guess it's like an art lesson, an art class. Then we got a chance to go outside and play with them during recess. And like ours, they liked it. Here's one man playing some table tennis with them. I don't know if he ever won. This lady got a chance to play volleyball. I was sitting in there, and these two young guys came up, and they'd been working on origami, and they gave me their project as a little bit of present. So I thought I'd do them well. So I tucked them underneath and enjoyed the little gift that I got from them. I did go outside, and I saw this little girl sitting there. And then I look at those paintings behind her. Right behind her, we had a Canadian flag. More impressive, over here was a flag of Saskatchewan. I did not expect to come halfway around the world and see a school that had a Saskatchewan. Now that was because people from Saskatchewan had volunteered and to help build that and work that. Then I thought this was one of the most appropriate pictures, appropriate slogans you can find. And I thought it was pretty good. You had the Chinese flag on this side. You had the American flag on the other one. We are the children. And together, we are the world. But that is just an incredible message to go in and see. We did get a chance to look at their old school, and believe you me, I would not put pets in this place. It was terrible. The roof was sinking, the blackboards were cracked. It was awful. And you know, I said at the beginning that I was disappointed. I didn't want to go see another school. I kind of think now that this might have been my favorite part of this whole trip. It was so nice to see the happiness and how well we were welcomed by the people of that village. We got on the bus, we headed back, and then we got a chance to go to a cocoon or go to a silk factory. They started producing silk 600 years ago. They boil the skeins of the cocoons, and then they unravel them, and then they end up twisting those together to make the threads. Silk became so popular that they traded all over. It got as far as Greece. They traded in Lebanon. They traded in India. And to such an extent that they formed what was called the Silk Road to trade that. It was really interesting to see how this was done. And these are the smaller threads going to those cocoons. What astounds me, and I just love the texture of silk, and it astounded me that something that beautiful can something this gross. Now, when Sharon was there with her students one time, some of them bought some of the material. Like I said, that little worm creates this amazing cloth that is just fun. And I'll admit it, I didn't know what a duvet even was. And everybody said, oh, you got to buy a duvet because they're way cheaper. They're way cheaper on it. And now I look at it, I didn't buy a duvet, but now I wish I had when I look at these pictures, because it is appraising. And I have looked at the prices, and I could have got them way cheaper when I was there. There's just an example of all the cocoons just waiting to be able to be spun into those incredible pieces of clothing. Now that night, this is another thing. If you go to China, I really recommend you do this. This is the Hutong region. This is how all of Beijing was at the time. People lived like this. Now, when the People's Republic of China came in, all of a sudden there was some money. They did not want to waste it on these places. They could use it and they could make high rises. They could build expensive places. And so many of these places were destroyed. Finally, they passed a rule, or they passed a law that some had to be preserved. Now, this Hutong district is, well, it's like a museum. It shows how they used to live. It's how the common people were before they got there. And as it was, the first thing you have to do, found a rickshaw. When I was a kid, I always saw pictures of it. That would be kind of cool. But they didn't. Now they've revolutionized it. You see, they have bikes. They use bikes to take people around, which saves people that kind of move. They're big enough, they're able to handle, but somehow nothing would have been right traveling through that district in anything other than one of the rickshaws. And you got a chance to see the types of homes. Then we got to go into one of the homes for supper. Our arrangement was we could go in and have supper made, a typical Chinese supper in the Hutong district. This is the man who owned the house. He served us. His wife cooked it in their kitchen, and the food was incredible. It was just a traditional family food meal served in their place, and it really was incredible. This is, now I wanted to show this though, because even with time, every one of these has a picture of Mao. It's a normal kitchen, very simple pictures, but they always are able to have a picture of Chairman Mao. Now, Sharon was so impressed, she asked to go back and meet the cook. Gave her credit. Well, that was always awfully nice about it, that you got a chance to go back and shake hands and thank the cook. And she says, yeah, but my other meaning was I wanted to see what her kitchen looked like. But it was nice. This was kind of intriguing. This man and his daughter were there they were there from Ontario, and they were having dinner. And as we sat there, there's a young boy there kept staring at it. You can't see, but his hair is long and it's tied up in kind of a ponytail at the back. Finally, one of the mother of the place went and asked him, what's wrong? And he pointed out when he says, that's Jake the Snake Roberts. And I thought, that they even have professional wrestling here, because at that time, Jake Roberts was one of the big draws in the World Wrestling Federation. And he was great because he undid his ponytail, hung it down, and darn it, he didn't look exactly like that professional wrestler. And then the boy came over and they couldn't get enough pictures. I'm sure he went back and said how Jake the Snake Roberts of the World Wrestling Federation came and ate at his house. Next morning, we went to the #1 tourist attraction. This was the Great Wall of China. And it is the Great Wall. At one time, I'd heard the story that it's the only man-made structure that you can see from outer space. In reality, you can't see it from outer space. That doesn't make it any less of one of the most amazing things I have ever seen. Like, it is one of the 7 wonders of the world. And I'm thinking, if this isn't a wonder of the world, I have no idea what is a wonder of the world. This down here is the main area that you walk in. This one is an area that not that many people go that direction. It's a little tougher climb, but it is, we ended up going the other direction, which helps to show that there it goes for 13,000 miles. And even as long as it goes, 1/3 of it has completely disappeared. It was made by both soldiers and forced labor. It is said that 6 cavalry horsemen can ride side by side. I did not realize it was that wide and that big. Got to this point and I thought, man, oh man, can you just imagine what it would be like being a Chinese soldier up there, watching Genghis Khan's hordes coming after you for those, and just hoping that this wall was enough. Now, I've done some research and I've done two things on Google, so they both must be true. It is said that Genghis Khan was the only person ever to breach the walls of the Great Wall. And another thing I read said Genghis Khan had nothing to do with the Great Wall of China. So I go by that I can pick whatever kind of story I want from that. And I like to think of Genghis Khan coming there with his Mongol warriors trying to get into China at this wall right where I was standing. It receives about 70,000 visitors every day. I also didn't realize that some of it is so steep because it goes up and down hills that you have to have stairs to go up and down. See, not everybody is that impressed by the Great Wall. Now, needless to say, because of its historical significance, school kids are constantly visiting it. This is a group of young schoolgirls who had been there. They were incredibly happy. With me at the time, a friend of mine was with me. He was extremely tall. People were constantly coming up to him asking to have their pictures taken with him. They don't get that many Westerners, and the Westerners impress them, and especially if they're tall. And Sharon also was getting people wanting because she was blonde. They don't get an awful lot of blonde people around that one. And they would all come up to you and they would be asking to talk to you, to see how things were. And everybody was extremely, extremely happy to see you and visit with you. On the way home, we did a chance to drive by the Olympic Village. A lot of these places were brought into, we just finished having the Olympics, the Winter Olympics there, and many of these places were used. This particular one is the tennis center in the Summer Olympics, and I think there was some skating done in there during the Winter Olympics. This is the National Indoor Stadium. Gymnastics at the time was held there. This is the water cube. That's where they held their, well, that's when the water cube was where they held most of the swimming and diving events. Unfortunately, you also notice the constant smog. They have a rule there when you're driving. You can only, if your license plate, to try to help control it, you can only go, if your license plate ends in an even number, you have to go on even number days. If your license plate ends in an odd number, you can only drive an odd number days. I don't know, maybe it was the excitement of seeing this amazing country. I don't know, but I don't even remember the smog all that much. This, of course, is the famous bird's nest. It held the opening ceremonies in track and field. It was also the opening ceremonies. I didn't see a lot of it, but I did see some of the opening ceremonies that took place in the Winter Olympics. Now, one of the things I didn't hear, though, every time you'd walk, you'd hear this amazing buzz. And I couldn't figure it out until it was explained. In certain cycles, 4 to 5 year cycles, they're the cicadas. That's these little bugs. Now, they can't fly, but they make the same sort of noise that the crickets do by rubbing their legs together. And this was everywhere. Now, it didn't really bother me because you get so used to it, it's just something that has happened. That evening, I had my chance to have Peking duck. It's so famous that you have to, and everybody that goes, it's one of the most popular meals owned by tourists. Now, I did learn it's not so much the fact that the duck tastes different, it's the presentation. The man comes out like this, and he makes the presentation too. There are two ways you can have it. They'll either take it and roast it whole and stuff, just much like we do our roast fowl that we do. But a lot of the times they cut it into very thin slices, and they put it on a little pancake. Then they add some onions, some cucumbers, and some carrot strips, and they serve it like that. They also have a little sauce. They make a little sauce that's made of garlic and soy, and you can dip it in that sauce, and you can see that over in here. Or you can also add sugar. I didn't bother with the sugar. I thought it tasted great just the way that it was. It was basically roast duck. A lot of the other food, incredible. As you can see, this is that whole thing, and that was impressed me. All of the tables have these lazy Susans, and I liked it because they could bring out a dish and put them on there, and then you could taste it. And if you liked it, you could take more. If you didn't, you didn't touch anymore. You found out, there weren't many things that I sent back though. Another example of some of the amazing food, and also the chopsticks. I was lucky enough to have somebody teach me how to use chopsticks. So I was able to handle those. You can see I'm taking my piece of Peking duck here and adding little bits and pieces that were there. But you notice you didn't have to. The lady sitting to my right there has a fork in her hand. One of the things when I had to travel during the summertime was that quite often my birthday would follow. EF never lets that get by. I was treated one night on the day of first of all, I tried to hide it because I didn't want anybody to know about it, but it doesn't escape. But sure enough, one night out they come. This was the birthday cake that they had prepared for me. And it wasn't just a cake, as you can see, it was incredible. Fortunately, as you can see, I was the king for a day, and it also looks like I might have eaten the whole cake, but I didn't. I shared it with all of my travel companions. Couldn't get through without spending one day down at the park working on Tai Chi. I didn't really know what it is, but I guess the best I could compare it with was maybe it's like shadow boxing, where you just go through the motions and stretch out your muscles. But it also combines it with meditation, and meditation sort of helps. I did it for a little bit, for a little while, and then I used the pretense that I wanted to take pictures. This was an example. These people are all part of the Go Ahead group. This is the man who is doing the teaching. Keep a look at this one. Looks to me like the two girls have done it before. He doesn't look quite as comfortable. He almost looks like I did when I was trying. Can't see enough about her. That was a nice way just to contemplate in the park. There was all sorts of actions, meditations going on in that park. Then it was time to go home. Sat back and I thought, what can I say to try, and why would you want to go visit China, especially with the negative publicity that it's going through now? And all I can say is basically, people make up the country, not the politicians that run it. And you don't get to really know about these people unless you're there and working with them. There are several reasons why you should go to China. One of the reasons, a beautiful, beautiful works of art. History, no place. Like I said, 5,000-year older calendar than we've got. Their history is amazing, and it's a glorified history. Many of its devices have filtered into our society today. You want to go and eat? I wasn't crazy about the Mongolian dinner, but the rest of it was absolutely amazing. As you can see, the food is a delight. Or just the natural beauty that you will find every place. The lotus flowers, they worship flowers, they worship the beauty of nature. lots of reasons to want to go and enjoy this amazing country. But to me, the best reason to go is the hospitality you get from the people that happen to live there. That was China. It's a trip I'm going to remember for a long, long time.